Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So this video is going to be about how I made this big doll. It's a really big dude. His name's Alpha, the Purple Galaxy Wolf. He's basically based off a watercolor that I did a little while ago that's now available as a printable in on my Patreon for free over for my $5 and up tiers. Or you can purchase some prints over in my shop as well if you're interested in something like that. So I'm sort of releasing him in like a mini set, like a mini shop update. But this video is going to be about how I made him. I really like the yellow eyes. I think it really brings out his face. It really stands out against the purple and the blue and the dark sort of background. Added a little spiral galaxy that was just a spur of the moment type thing. I thought it would, I don't know, I just really liked the way it looked. I started off really light and yeah, just carried on from there. So he's a pretty big doll. He's my new wolf sculpt that I made last year, I think it was. And yeah, pretty cool. He's pretty posable. As well. He's got a nice range of motion. He's got a ball and socket armature, so yeah, nice range of motion on everything. So yeah. So if you want to see how I made him, then keep watching. So my patrons have early access to purchase him, so if they haven't snapped him up, he'll be in my shop at creaturesofnote.com. And yeah, keep watching. Alrighty, so starting off with a resin cast of a sculpture that I sculpted out of monster clay and then molded in silicone and then cast in resin. So this cast has some glass eyes cast inside of it. I have a tutorial in my shop at creaturesofnet.com if you'd like to learn how I cast these glass eyes inside of a resin head. It comes as a video tutorial, so you'll get a downloadable link once you've gone through the checkout. But anyway, so I'm painting up all the pieces that need to be, that are going to be exposed and out of the faux fur. So I'm using a water-based acrylic paint by the brand Chrome Acryl, and I decided just to go with a regular black color because this Galaxy Wolf I want it sort of dark and needs to have some black in it. And I think the black really makes the eyes stand out as well. So usually I prime my pieces before I paint it using it's a canvas primer by Derivian Matisse, and I think it works really well for resin. So the same deal with the paws as well. It's a sculpture that I originally made right at the start when I started making art dolls, and I just really think these paws are really good. And I sculpted them out of Super Sculpey. I still have the original piece, and once the mold sort of disintegrates and comes to its life, I just remake a new one with that same one. So painting it up again with that same acrylic paint. Moving on to the faux fur. I got this really nice faux fur a little while ago and I don't think I can get it again. But it's really, really nice, and it looks so much like a galaxy. I could probably get one more doll out of it, and I'm thinking maybe a galaxy flying fox. So just drawing out the patterns for the body that I created onto the back of the faux fur. I'm using some chalk this time just to mark out where I want to cut, but just be careful with what you're marking with. If you use like a heavy texture or something, when you start gluing all the pieces together, sometimes that seeps through onto your faux fur, especially if you have light faux fur. So just keep that in mind what you're using to mark your things. Grey lead works really well if you want to avoid any of that. So just cutting out the shapes so far. I'm going to cut it out off this bigger piece so I can make it a more workable piece. So a little look at the faux fur. You can see some of it has grey underneath, so that's always something to keep in mind when you're using faux fur, is what colour the undertone is, the underfur, because when you trim it, that's what colour it's going to be. So in this instance, it's going to be grey and patches of purple and blue as well. So I'm going around and cutting all of the pieces out. I use a small pair of sharp scissors to cut it out. That way I can insert the blade in between the pile and I'm not actually cutting the pile. You can do this with a blade as well, but I find it sort of stretches the fabric and I don't really like the way it cuts, so I find a small pair of scissors works really well, or even pointier scissors if you want to use larger ones. Just be careful not to cut the pile. So usually my bodies consist of 3 pieces and also the tail, so the underbelly and both sides. So I'll be sewing this one up using a sewing machine. I also hand sew things as well if I am doing a special sort of body that I don't want to make a pattern for, if I need a certain sort of look to it. So this is a little look at what it's going to look like once it's all put together. It's a big doll this time. It's one of the biggest dolls that I've made, aside from the stags and the kurama that I'm working on. It's still sitting there unfinished. But yeah, it's going to be a big doll, and whoopsie. So once it's been sewn up on the sewing machine, I usually just sew around the edges, leaving the legs open, obviously the neck hole open, and also the back end open as well, so I can flip it the right way around. Just be careful if you're doing smaller pieces, because sometimes it is a little bit difficult to flip the right way around. So I usually leave a bigger hole just so it doesn't damage the fur. If you're having a bit of trouble, I'd recommend using a blunt tool to sort of poke it through. I have like a blunt wooden tool that I use to poke through any bits that I'm finding it a little bit difficult to get through, or you can use some needle nose pliers as well. Just be careful not to rip out the pile while you're doing it. So gentle, and just take some time in flipping it the right way around. And then you have a little fluffy thing that needs to be put together. So the armature, the video for this, I'm going to put over my Patreon, and it will just go through putting the armature together, the ball and socket armature. So you can head over there. It's for my $5 and up tiers, and you'll get access to a whole heap of other videos as well. So that's going to be over on my Patreon. But yes, there is a ball and socket armature that I used in this doll. It's really sturdy. I've sort of moved away from using wire armatures just because I find the ball and socket to be a bit more sturdy and a bit easier to get as well, for me anyway. So yeah, it's great for big dolls. If I'm doing a really small doll, then yes, I'll use a ball and socket, a wire armature. But yeah, normally I've been using ball and socket armatures for a while. So once all that's been inserted and ready to go, I can start attaching and sewing up all the pieces. So I start off usually by attaching the neck area just so it has like a solid base, and I can sort of work off that. I can pull the fabric when I want it to pull it down on the legs, and also when I add the stuffing, I can also sort of ram it in there. So I use a tacky fabric glue to attach all of the fabric to my resin. Works really well. If you're in Australia, you can get it from Spotlight, but you'll be able to find something comparable in your local craft stores. There should be tacky fabric glue everywhere. It's just a clear, thick glue that dries quite quickly and quite solidly. So that's what we sort of have at the beginning, and then I can start sewing everything up. So I use a ladder stitch to sew all of the loose ends up. I use a good quality thread because using cheap thread is kind of difficult, and it gets sort of tangled inside the pile, and then it snaps really easily. So I have a video for a ladder stitch on my channel if you want to check that out too. And then yeah, I've just got around and sew everything up. So once it's all sewed up, I can start gluing things together as well. So I use that same tacky fabric glue and start gluing the legs to the feet. And I usually leave it to dry at least for a few hours, if not overnight, so it really adheres to the resin. And then I can start adding some stuffing to it. So once I'm added all the stuffing and I'm happy with the way it's looking, I can start sewing it up completely. So the last thing that I sew is usually the tail, and then I sew it off in the butthole area. So you can't really tell that there's been any sort of stitching, and you want to make sure it's really stitched and it is secure, because it's going to be doing a lot of posing like so. So this is what it looks like once it's been fully sewed up and no trimming, no anything done to it. You can see it's starting to take shape of the wolf. I wasn't really happy with the neck area, so what I did was gave it a little trim, had a look at what I liked, and then I sort of sewed up the neck area at the back a little bit just to give it a bit more definition, because it was just a bit chunky. It didn't really have the form of a wolf. So yeah, I just did that up a little bit. I just unpicked it and then re-sewed it. Once that's done, I added the faux fur to the face, and then once that's done, again, I give it a trim and start cleaning all the areas up and adding all the little details that need to be added. So getting all the faux fur that's stuck on the eyes, and then adding the details again around the eyes just to make it pop and bring it some more character. And I use a couple of different things to add details. Mainly I'm using that same paint that I used at the start of the video, or I can use some fabric paints by Jacquard. It depends what I'm painting and how I'm painting it and what I want to achieve. I've also used textile textures as well, which work really well for finer details. But ideally I just add any details with some fabric paints and or the paint that I used at the start. So this design was kind of free flow from here on out. I wasn't really intending to make a galaxy wolf, it just sort of turned into one. It was loosely based off a watercolor, I don't know what I'm saying there, but loosely based off a watercolor that I did a while ago. So I added little star details to it, as you can see in the original watercolor. That one is available for a free printable this month, hence over on my Patreon. And then I decided to just change it up a little bit, and this is a really good technique if you don't have a airbrush and you want to add little details like this. Just get yourself a old toothbrush, add some paint to it and flick it. It works really, really well for stars and little details that you want to add like this, little strips, little anything like this. Toothbrush works really well if you want to use if you don't have an airbrush. But yeah, I thought it worked really well. I just enhanced the galaxies with some paint and some brush, and worked really well. So this guy's been snapped up by a Patreon, but I have a whole lot of other little galaxy wolf things in my shop. Check it out at creaturesofnat.com. Thanks very much to my patrons for supporting me. I really appreciate it. You can also check me out at Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat. Everything's in the description box, so check it out, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.